Welcome to Book Backstory. My name is Karla Brandenburg, and I'm an award-winning author of romantic suspense and paranormal novels. This podcast is a walk along my journey. I plan to interview some of my favorite authors, share with you some of the things that get me excited to write a book, and the stumbling blocks during the process. In this episode, I'm going to talk about setting. How do you decide where to place your novel? As I consider the existential question, what do I write next? I'm antsy to get out into the world for inspiration, but that's easier said than done these days. I'm generally inspired by things I see. A creepy old house with an unkempt yard, closed in by an iron fence, a well-maintained B&B set on the top of a hill, or in a vale, filled with charm. A French farmer's market, hoodoos, an unexpected castle tucked into a neighborhood in my own backyard, a small Green New Deal town with quirky decorations on the chimneys. My epitaph series started with the idea of a girl walking through a cemetery, and so I went on a cemetery walk in Bluff City Cemetery. Sometimes it's a sound that sticks with me. Passing through the Zurich airport, they played a recording on the shuttle between the international terminal and the local terminal of yodeling and cows mooing and alpine horns. These are things I want to share, things I aspire to write so other people can experience these special places, or at least make people feel the way I do when I experience them. There's a Swiss village in Wisconsin called New Glarus, where my parents took my sisters and me to celebrate our Swiss heritage. Every year, they do a Heidi Festival and a Wilhelm Tell Festival. Not sure how many people remember the movie Heidi, about a little girl whose parents die and she's sent to live in a cabin with her grandfather in the Swiss Alps. The images that stick with me from the movie are cows and mountains and pastoral vistas, accompanied by the sounds of yodeling and mooing and a church choir. When I go to New Glarus, these sights and sounds come to life, even if there are rolling hills instead of imposing mountains. New Glarus boasts brown Swiss cows, and during festival times, it isn't unusual to encounter a Fraulein on the street wearing a dirndl or a man in his lederhosen. When we were kids, we'd also encounter St. Bernards with kegs hanging from their necks. On my last visit, the Manon choir was practicing in the parking lot outside the hotel balcony of the Chalet Landhaus. Beautiful harmonies of men's voices and haunting yodeling. If yodeling isn't your thing, and maybe you don't care about Heidi and grandfather, or that Wilhelm Tell shot an apple off his son's head, New Glarus also has a brewery and is surrounded by many cheese factories. There are dozens of these types of villages sprinkled around the U.S. There's a similar village in California north of Santa Barbara called Solvang. This one is Danish. Like New Glarus, the town reflects the old world charm and architecture unique to its culture. You'll find a statue dedicated to Hans Christian Andersen in Solvang, along with a Little Mermaid statue. There are windmills and gingerbread-style buildings. I've actually seen a movie that takes place in Solvang, and while it was entertaining, I didn't feel the heart of the village in the movie, which is what makes me shy to try to write about such a unique place. I like to think Hans Christian Andersen was similarly inspired by sights and sounds. I picture him sitting by the sea while he writes tales of mermaids and ugly ducklings, the stories hiding in plain sight. As an author, I try to see these things rather than mourn my inability to venture out and find new and different horizons. And quite often, when I'm stuck writing, I walk out and about, and images present themselves to me. I document some of these things on my Instagram page. Such is the gift of imagination, taking an ordinary setting and turning it into something extra. This is when I remind myself that rather than searching out a new locale, I can draw from my experiences. I can use the old windmill my cousin took us to see. Let my characters have a picnic there as the paddle wheel slowly turns, and maybe the characters hear someone at a nearby farm singing while they do their chores, practicing for their part in the Manon choir and yodeling, or several farmhands singing together like in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. My life is a musical after all. This concept is called Write What You Know, and then bend it to fit your purposes. In my Hoffman Grove series, I tapped into a local town that still has a main street and old-style buildings. Stores below, and what they call taxpayer apartments above, a term I learned while writing Cookie Therapy. They call them taxpayers because an investor can buy the property and operate it at a break-even rate while building equity over time, or because a typical commercial leak effectively pays the taxes on the property. This particular town was used as a setting in a movie, The Road to Perdition with Tom Hanks. And while everyday real life there reflects a struggling local economy, the charm of brick buildings with cornerstones and store names in the stonework harkens back to another time. The sense of community in these types of towns is strong, which makes for good book locales, and having one close by makes it easy for me to describe and fashion to my designs. Settings hiding in plain sight. Which brings me back to, where do I go next? Staying aside isn't a hardship on me, except when I want to broaden my horizons, which I usually do every time I finish a book. So those are the times I want to go out into the world and find new experiences, meet new people, see new things. But I have dozens of experiences to draw on. A story set on a cruise ship, and Affair to Remember is one of my favorite movies after all, and I've been on cruise ships. An adventure in Alaska, a tour of Chicago. I could use any of these settings and employ the write what you know philosophy. Funny story. I took a trip to England and Scotland many years ago and used the sites I'd seen in Living Canvas. While I was writing, I tapped into a critique group with Romance Writers of America for feedback and encountered a woman who lives in England who took exception to my descriptions. She told me I shouldn't write about places I've never been. I did correct her misconception, but took into account the things that impacted me weren't the things she thought I should have made note of. I chose to change the story and take touring a different direction. The funny part here is that I hadn't traveled that different direction and had to rely on an English friend to help me find my way. We all see the world a little differently. My imagination generally ventures one book ahead, but with the times we're living in, we've had to learn to be more flexible, more adaptable. Routine can be elusive. I imagine a road trip in my near future, but until I can figure out where to go, it might be time to pull out the photo albums. While I wait for my editor to finish with the current book, I've been considering if I should dive into a new series, but I also still have room to continue my Hillendale novels and ideas to use there. Until next time, this is Karla Brandenburg. Thanks for tuning in.